Within every set of possible choices, there must exist the best one. Sometimes said best choice is hard to indisputably decide upon. Unfortunately, in Warrior's weapon arsenal, there isn't enough objectively good choices to compete for the number one spot. And amongst few that fit into this criteria, one stands out from the rest. Swords put all other violence utensils Warrior has access to shame in terms of reliability, all while enabling hybrid builds and synergizing with pretty much every trait line Warrior has. Of course, nothing is perfect. Garlic bread has expiration date, Titanfall has smart pistol, Pizza has pineapple variant, Elden Ring has negative edge dodge button, Penguins have criminal tendencies, Cerus has no romance option, Henry Cavill has a jawline, and I have no bloody idea what the I'm talking about. Anyhow, swords are objectively best warrior weapon, and I'm willing to die on this hill, both because I'm right and because I want to die in general. That said, we can't proclaim something is good without explaining exactly why, and to that I present sword skills. Even Auto Chain has notable features of applying bleeding on every hit, which lends swords their first and newest trait synergy, on top of which third hit in Auto Chain also applies Cripple, which synergizes with yet another trait. Next in line, Savage Leap is, as the name suggests, a leap, with quite significant range and short cooldown, with Cripple application on top of it. As a movement skill, it also benefits from one of strongest trait synergies in Warrior's entire arsenal, and Cripple repeats the synergy mentioned before, being both a gap closer, which lets you get into melee, and applying a condition which helps you stay in melee, while being available every 8 seconds without cooldown reduction. You would be hard pressed to find another ability which lets you control space just like this one. Not to mention, as an ability that retains altitude, it is one of very few skills that allow Warrior for taking shortcuts and pathways he wouldn't be able to take otherwise. That combined with sufficient damage make this skill a very good movement tool. Moving on. Final Thrust lags behind a little bit in utility, but focuses instead on damage. This skill deals significant power damage and applies not a noticeable amount of bleeding, with both upfront damage and the amount of bleeding applied doubled against targets below half health. In multiple sets of circumstances, Final Thrust would be passable even without the execute mechanic, and with it, it is one of most satisfying skills to use, which spikes decently hard in every build, power, condi or hybrid. This wide damage profile will return to later. For now, let's transition on to next ability. Impale is a medium range projectile which deals decent upfront damage, applies unique impaled effect to your target, said effect applies Cripple and Torment, all while rendering the target eligible to be hit with Rip, Impale's flip-up skill, which does very significant damage and grants you very significant amount of might. Here damage situation is a little more complex and complicated than on a previous skill, but not so much to give anyone aneurysm. Condition builds mostly care about torment application and not the upfront and follow-up damage, but they still do care as every condi build can apply power damage and Rip grants might, which increases both types of damage. Power builds don't really care for torment as it doesn't really synergize with anything and doesn't really do much damage if you don't have condition stats, so impaled effect duration for them is only a time window for landing Rip. All while hybrid builds won't both maximize the condition application and still land the flip-up skill, which leads to more interesting interactions with the enemy as decision making based on risk and reward factor just has another variable applied. This singular skill adds more complexity to the gameplay than some people do, and that I find hilarious. And if at this point, with mobility, power and condition burst, as well as ranged harass tool with flip-up skill, swords weren't clear contender for the best designed warrior weapons, how about some defensive utility? Riposte is a hard block, just like shield stance, but with caveat of ending early with a melee counterattack if you get hit in melee range. This is, all means considered, effectively shield 5 on a half the cooldown, if you manage to keep a little distance of course. That combined with Shield Master and Blade Master traits allow you to IQ check a ranger every 12 seconds. And if that wasn't enough, Blocking enemies' gap closer means they take a slap to the face with 8 stacks of bleeding on it. Riposte, in many cases, is objectively better version of shield stance, as unless you can taste your opponent's chest hair, both skills do the same, with one having drastically shorter cooldown. However, here we must meet the long-foretold flaw in otherwise perfect weapon. Only skill within Sword's toolkit that needs some sort of update is the best skill. Flurry used to be a design disaster likes of 100 blades, locking you in place and dealing damage over time. Flurry, however, also locked target in place with an immobilize and applied bleeding in addition to pure damage. Fortunately, someone with IQ above room temperature in Celsius works at ANET, so they removed self-root from Flurry, alongside reducing slightly its damage and animation length. Currently, with your kneecaps unleashed, you can run and do whatever you want during Flurry animation, which is a delight to do. Flurry still applies immobilize to enemy target, but for some reason it does so on first frame of animation, long before first instance of damage hits the target, which is stupid and counterintuitive, but not much of an issue. You just have to take note of that and aim Flurry's precast, because applying quarter-second immobilize on each hit would be too consistent, I guess. More notorious issue, however, is that Flurry cannot be interrupted by any ability or function other than weapon swap, dodge or stow weapon. So if you have to heal in a pinch, you better have stow cancel ready, because there must be one ability that doesn't follow the clear and understandable pattern. And that functionality transfers to Flaming Flurry as well. A small complaint, but a complaint nonetheless. If that issue is ever going to be fixed, I start suspecting ANET hired someone with IQ above room temperature in Fahrenheit. In summary, sword skills are just good in general, while also having some sort of a synergy with every trait line warrior has. They complement warrior's desired playstyle and can be utilized even in most builds diverging sharply from that original playstyle. For example, Savage Leap is really good tool for chasing opponents, but if need calls for it, serves just as well as a tool to increase distance from your foe. Riposte can be used to cover your approach or to ensure survival during a retreat, so you can slot swords both into insanely aggressive builds or to ones that prefer ranged or defensive approach to combat. Nonetheless, because both condition application and power ratios of all sword skills are above mediocrity, they can be utilized in every type of build, power, hybrid or condition, while also benefiting from every single drop of stat increase that pure combi or pure power weapons couldn't. To top it off, swords synergize very well with other warrior weapons. Whatever build you could imagine, swords have something in their toolkit that will suit your interest or at least be worth considering. For all intents and purposes, regardless if we look at it from perspective of skill-by-skill design quality, broad spectrum of builds it can fit into, its multiple synergies, its hybrid damage application, its multi-purpose skills or even just the meme potential, swords in the end come out on top of all other warrior weapons because they can fill their unique niche without sacrificing any sort of usability in the process. On top of which they look absolutely smashing. Crapface out.